the way a balanced practice works is you start off doing pranayama, which is, well, you actually start off doing the asanas. So you start off from the physical and it moves forward vibrationally higher all the way through the practice. So the sun salutations will be the physical aspect of it. We then go on to the pranayama, which we do just 5 minutes of, and I will explain to you from the beginning exactly the sort of pranayama that we do. Pranayama is energizing, because there is this misconception that meditation, you're kind of out to lunch and there's no one at home, and it's absolutely not. It is being absolutely in full awareness to the exclusion of everything else. So it is super sensitivity, and pranayama energizes one in the right way. So you will be familiar with the rising of the vibration through the different chakras, because the chakras, the 6 internal chakras, start off at the most material, the most physical, and they rise in vibration to the most refined. And the whole exercise of pranayama is to raise the energy, but do it in a safe way, because there's a lot of misconception about pranayama. There is this idea that you have to do it for hours and so on and so forth. It's not so. What's more important is that you get the technique right. Hi. What's more important is that you get the technique right. And the practice that we're going to do is for people that lead normal lives. They work, they have kids, families, and so on and so forth, and you can fit it in. So you don't have to go off on a lengthy retreat or anything like this. What you need to do is allocate 20 minutes per day, approximately, twice a day, morning and evening, to do the practice. And it is important with any practice, not just this, to do it on a daily basis. If you do it occasionally, it's all fine and nice and you'll relax, but you're not actually, the train will never leave the station, right? It's something that is cumulative and it's dynamic. So you should be, it's a journey, you should be moving continuously forward. The pranayama, by including pranayama in a practice, it puts the practice on, well, I suppose you can call it on steroids. What it does is it makes the whole practice much, much more potent. And you need to be aware of that. So what it's doing is it's introducing a very strong energy into the practice. So we do the pranayama, and I will go into... I was actually not expecting so many people here today who hadn't been here before. So I've got to actually rejig my thinking to go back to the beginning and explain the whole thing right the way through, which I wasn't really planning to do. However, we'll do it. So the pranayama is the energetic aspect of it. We always start stable. So if it is that we're in an agitated state, we've come in from work or whatever it is, the baby's crying or whatever, we don't just sit down, get into it. We sit down, stabilize ourselves first. That's the most important thing. Never start a practice until one is really stable. And one will we'll do 3 deep breaths in order, and I'll show you how the breaths are done for pranayama, in order to get nice and stable. Because if we start any practice and we're not completely stable, it's much, much harder to get into it. So we're really fighting against the waves all the time that way. We need to start as stable as we can be. Now, obviously, we're only going to be stable to some degree because the practice is trying to make us more stable. We then go from the pranayama into the meditation. Now, what is the meditation practice? The meditation practice is for us to realize that we are not who we actually think we are. It is we believe, we are accustomed to associating ourselves with our thoughts. So we constantly throughout our lives are going from one thought to the next thought to the next thought. But there's more to it than that, and I'll give you an analogy that is a good one, and I've used it before, and that is that, let's use a different one today. When you look at I'll go back. Imagine the sky. Imagine the sky is full of clouds. All you see is clouds, no sun, no nothing. You've never seen the sun. You just see clouds. The clouds represent the thoughts. They're always moving, never the same, always going on. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there is a small chink in the clouds and we see the sun. And as we concentrate on that vision of the sun, the clouds very slowly disperse, but slowly. So each time we see a little bit more and a little bit more. And what we realize is that everybody is seeing the sun in exactly the same way. I don't see it any differently from you. I see the clouds differently. My clouds are not the same as your clouds. Depending on where you are geographically will depend on how you see the clouds or not see the clouds. But the sun is always the same. Now, meditation practice is about getting in and getting a glimpse of the sun and then expanding that so that we start to see ourselves not in terms of our thoughts. So our thoughts, we create a space so that we can actually see ourselves thinking. Now, when we're able to do that, we then realize that we are not our thoughts, because otherwise, who is the thinker? If you can see your thoughts, then there has to be somebody else that is actually thinking, because if we were our thoughts, we wouldn't be able to do that. So the whole aspect of meditation, which actually is very, very simple, is designed to create that space, and in that space is stability, is silence. And meditation practice is about expanding that space so that our thoughts start diminishing. They start becoming less intense and less often. And that makes life more pleasant, because it's not just about doing this practice when we are sitting here or when we do our practice every day. We have to bring our practice into our daily lives. That's the important thing, that we don't just get up and say, oh, well, that was the practice, and then carry on as normal. The object is to use what we learn in our everyday lives. So what we will find is that our mind, that is, in Buddhism, it's called a monkey mind. Our monkey mind, which is constantly moving. Did I put out the cat? Did I make the tea? Does someone like me? Have I done this? Have I done that? Constant. Which makes us neurotic and is based on attraction or repulsion, right? That's dualism. It's based on purely that. In other words, it's judgmental. And the more we have invested in that particular thought, the more crazy we get. Because stress, which is what that type of thinking is, monkey mind is, stress is only our relationship between now and the past, or now and the future. In this moment, there is no stress. And meditation is about getting into that moment where there is no stress. Now, that doesn't mean that after that time suddenly it's all going to happen and there's not going to be any more stress in one's life. But over a period of time, one's stress threshold diminishes. So we start off and we'll find we'll find, for example, that things that don't really bother us that much, but bother us some, like driving. You know, you drive along and somebody honks the horn at you and you get nuts and so on and so forth, and you know, and all of a sudden you'll find you've been doing practice for several months, and you find suddenly somebody honks the horn and you're not so crazy, and it's small things. You notice that you're more mellow, generally, just a bit more mellow in your life. And that's what the practice is about. It's about your life. It's not the practice itself, whether it's this practice or any other practice, is meaningless once you've got the message of what the practice is trying to teach you. In other words, don't get hung up on the practice. Get hung up on the result of the practice. That's what's important. And the result of the practice is very much a question of motivation, right? And it is important to be clear as to why one is doing the practice. Now, there are a range of different reasons why one would do the practice, and they are all valid. It can be that one wants to do it for health. Let's say one has health issues and one wants to improve one's health, because it will improve one's health purely because we relax more physically, mentally, and our health will improve because the chemical signal that permeates our body will be changed by less stress, because stress is a killer. Our mind sends out chemicals throughout our body, a chemical signature, which over time damages our body. That's what stress does. And it will find the weakest part that we have. So we all have predispositions, weakness, a weak point genetically. And the stress over time will find that. So we may do it for health. We may do it because we just want to relax. That's fine too. We may want to do it for spiritual reasons. The reason I say that it's important to figure out, and it may vary by the day, so it can be that, for example, today I've got a health issue and I want to really feature that, and I want to try to improve my health and generally work my way around that. Another time it might be spiritual. But the thing about it is, whatever your motivation is, your practice moves towards, so that, say it's spiritual. And by that does not exclude all the others, because they all, and it may be that you do it and you say, look, I'm really not interested in the spiritual aspects, I'm just interested in, health or relaxation or whatever. But as the train leaves the station, you find that your motivation may very well change, because it draws you into a healthier lifestyle automatically. You don't have to do a thing. It will make you feel better physically, and it will make you feel better mentally. The mental first, and that affects the physical. So if you do it as a balanced combination with hatha yoga, with the asanas, the physical aspect, and the mental aspect with the breath control and so on and so forth, because it is important that it is balanced, you will, over a period of time, start feeling a lot better in general terms. It's not a straight trajectory. You can go through periods where you'll feel, I'm really moving forward. And then you go, I'm doing great here. I'm on my way to enlightenment. I'm almost there. And then something happens and one finds one isn't. Because what happens is the threshold changes. So you might find that things that are relatively insignificant don't bother you anymore. But along comes something that's really a big deal, and you start feeling like shit all over again. So the practice builds up that threshold, but it takes time, and you have to commit yourself on a daily basis to do it for over a long period of time, but the benefit is great. Now, I can tell you that I started learning Raja Yoga 50 years ago. I'm 75, and I know many people of my age, and when you're young, you think you're going to last forever, and when you're young, you can make all kinds of mistakes, doesn't really matter. But, the problem with stress, and it all comes down to stress at the end of the day, is it's like the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon was originally a little stream, but it's got eroded and eroded and eroded in a track to become the Grand Canyon. And that's what happens over time. It doesn't matter in the short term, but if we create certain pathways mentally that are unhealthy, over a long period of time it affects us. And the practice mitigates against that happening. It enables us to be balanced and have a healthy outlook. And I can tell you, when you're older, it makes a big difference. It's to one's mental and physical health. So it's a lifestyle thing. One is not actually giving up anything, one's actually bringing something. And it's a relatively small amount of time that one needs to devote to it. Now, before going on, I think it'd be a good idea if we do the sun salutations. Everybody familiar with sun salutations? If not, just watch Julian. He'll have you all organised in no time.
I think most of you have learned some salutation.
We're going to do 3 to the left, 3 to the right.
Maybe 2, 2.
2 and 2.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So just to loosen ourselves up and focus on the breathing if we can. That'd be nice, yeah? So feet together. Shoulders up and back. Chin tucked in. Tailbone tucked in.
Lo siento que no lo practico y no me recuerdo cómo va.
Just if you move back.
I cannot see you.
We'll turn
Just
around.
Turn the mat around a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Move to that end.
Okay, I can't remember the order.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Breathe in, arms up. Breathe out, fold down. Breathe in, look up. Right foot back. Left foot back. Slowly lower ourselves, keeping the elbows close. Into cobra, breathe in. Breathe out. Into up, downward dog. Take a few breaths here. Step forward with the right foot. Hold on that. And down. As we come up, breathe in. And hands down. Okay. Arms up. Stepping back to the left foot, followed by the right, and slowly down. Up into cobra, and down, downward dog. Left foot coming forward. Hang down, relax. And then come up one vertebra at a time. Arms up, breathe in. And down. Straighten the next one. Looking up. Right foot back. Right back. Cobra. Down, go. Stepping forward, right foot. Forward by the left. And hang down. Breathe in as we come up. Downward dog. Stepping forward. Down. And up. Up, down. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Now I'm just going to explain to you briefly how I came to this practice. As I mentioned to you, I started 50 years ago, and I was taught Raja Yoga by, on a one-to-one basis with an Indian old man who hardly spoke English, and it was extremely difficult. In those days there were no books, very hard to get hold of books or anything, and it was a real struggle. And I thought, well, you know, there's got to be an easier way. And over the years I looked at and tried many, many different types of practices and Buddhist practices. And I found that there is a common denominator, there's a common thread, there's an essence of what you need to know. The rest of it is peripheral, it's subjective. You can find, pranayama is a huge subject. I mean, you can find, if you read Iyengar's book, it's this thick, and it's extremely confusing if you don't know, if you don't have a teacher. Even then, it's highly repetitive and not entirely necessary. And you'll find that everybody's got their own inflection on it, and it can be very confusing. But there is a common thread that runs through pranayama, meditation, yoga nidra, and that is what we're going to concentrate on. The rest of it is peripheral. It's, if you do the main practice right, if you do the pranayama right, then the rest of it is not important. It's not healthy to overdo it, and with any practice, you know, we in the West assume that the more you do, the more effort we put in, the more we're going to get out of it. But in fact, it's counterintuitive. It's not about how much of it you do, it's the quality of what you do, and usually you need to do little of it for it to be effective. With pranayama particularly, it's important that you don't overdo it. Now normally I'm going to go through and explain now the build-up of the practice, and we're then going to do it. So, the first thing I said to you, always come to the practice, relaxed. And for that, it's good to start off with 3 deep breaths. Now, I will show you afterwards the pranayamic way of breathing, but it should be strong breathing from the bottom. So you always start out breath, get rid of everything in your lungs, and then breathe in slowly. And as you breathe in, imagine energy permeating throughout your body. This is not the pranayama, this is just the preamble. And on the out breath, imagine relax. You feel relaxation throughout your whole body, all your muscles, just relax. You surrender to it, right? And you do that 3 times. And that's a good start point. So we're now in a nice space. Now the pranayama. Now, there are 2 aspects of pranayama, and the problem with pranayama often is that there's so much people think they have to remember that the practice collapses. So it's very important to build it up bit by bit, easily and slowly, because it's not that it's complicated, but what we're trying to do is to form a habit, and it's making habits in order so that it becomes an automatic process, because pranayama is a flow. Now this particular type of pranayama, what it is, now let me just start with the method of breathing. Now the object is you take the breath out, the body is divided first of all into a left and a right half. So you've got alternate nostril breathing. The object of alternate nostril breathing, although we don't do it in this practice, is that we equalize the 2 parts, the Ida and the Pingala, which are the 2 energies that need to be equalized, because until they are equalized, they will not rise through the central nerve, right? And that is what we are trying to achieve by the whole thing. So it is important that we breathe reasonably through both nostrils. Now by that, you do not have to do alternate nostril breathing. If you bring your attention to your left nostril, you will be conscious of the breath entering through your left nostril, your right nostril as well. And over time, you will be able to equalize it. As you breathe in, you will become conscious of them being close to equal. Now, often, when one hasn't done this, one may have one that is more than that is operating more than the other. Over time, they will tend to equalize. You can do alternate nostril breathing. Are you all familiar with that? Mm-hmm. Anybody not? Okay, so a simple way of doing it, you close the nostril, always sit centered. Breathe in. And just do that a few times. It's a good thing to do. It's not part of the main practice, but it's a good thing to do as an exercise to equalize the nostrils. So you've got the left and the right side, which are trying to get into phase. And then you've also got the 3 parts of the breath. You've got the lower part, the abdominal breath, because bear in mind that with pranayama, you are actually taking in, if you do it properly, about 7 times the amount of air, oxygen, that you otherwise would, because you're breathing fully. Normally, we're breathing You know, we're not really aware of our breath. We're just breathing up here, kind of, you know. And the breath, under normal circumstances, is a reflection of our emotion. So if we are agitated, our breath is reflective, is a reflection of that agitation. We tend to breathe according to our agitation. Whereas if we're calm, our breath is shallow and relaxed. So the breath is hugely important because it is the link between the body and the mind. It is the only thing that works automatically, but that we can control. And pranayama is about controlling prana, which is life force, but for this purpose, let's call it breath. Okay? And we can, by the way we breathe, control our energy, and that affects us physically and mentally. Now, we always start breathing out. This is the abdominal breath is here. So we start from the bottom, breathe here, and meditation is only done here. We then have the middle part, and the middle part depends on us getting these ribs out. To get these ribs out meaning like this, we have to have a little bit of control over the abdomen. So we hold the abdomen in a bit, not crazy, but just in a bit. And as you breathe in, if you put your hands here, you will feel that your ribs should go out. Just practice it until you do. So if you breathe in here heavily, you cannot get your ribs out. So you just need to put a little bit of muscular control on the abdomen, and you will find that the ribs come out. And then the last part is the upper part, where you imagine that the breath is coming right up to one's shoulders. So we start off, we breathe out, so that we've got nothing in our lungs, so our abdomen is in, and we do it slowly. So everything about pranayama, everything about meditation, everything about the practice is to slow down, not to speed up. We have a tendency to speed everything up. So we want to slow down, slow our breathing, slow everything down. So as we breathe in, we go. And breathing out, we do the opposite. So we set up a cycle, if you like, in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out. That's what we're trying to do. But we stop at the top and we stop at the bottom, so that it is a very definite start to the breath, get to the top, and when we breathe out, it's not like it kind of fades away at the top and fades away at the bottom. It's a very definite start of the breath, stop of the breath, and then exhale. As we exhale, we do exactly the same as we are bringing it up, but we do it in a controlled way. Does anybody know what ujjayi breath is? You do, I know. Right. Ujjayi breath is from the throat, and it slows down and it gives us more control over the out breath. So it's a good thing to do. It's not. It's another thing to think about if you haven't done it before. So it's not mandatory, but if you know how to do it, it's easy. All you really do is you bring your attention to your breathing from here, and your throat closes, so that your breath you're able to control the out breath better. The out breath should roughly be twice the in breath. There are some pranayama systems where you count. don't think that's good, because then you're spending your time counting and not doing what you should be doing. So long as it's approximately 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, it doesn't matter. Because the out breath will always tend to be slower than the in breath. Because when you breathe in, you're fighting against a tendency to expel. So there is a resistance when you breathe in. When you breathe out, there isn't the same resistance, and you do it slower. Okay? So that's one aspect of pranayama. It's not important at the beginning to get all this right, because it's not going to happen that you're going to get it all right instantly. The key is to take one element or two elements and try to familiarize yourself with that, because you've got to build it up. If you try to do everything all together, it'll all fall apart, and then you have to start all over again. So just take it in bits, and over time it becomes a flow. Now, having made that shouldn't be complicated, but in your minds it might be. But the key to the thing with pranayama is with your mind. What you do while you're doing the breathing is you bring your attention to the base of your spine, right? Very base. Okay? And you imagine an ember or a small light at that point, right? Everybody clear on that? Small light, ember. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be Mickey Mouse. But the point about it is that you are bringing your mind to a point with clarity. So an ember is a convenient sort of thing to associate with it, or a light. So you bring it to the base of your spine, and as you breathe in, it rises up the spinal channel to this point at the back of one's head and forward to the 6th chakra here. Right? So as you're breathing in, don't think lungs when you do pranayama. Try to avoid that sort of thought. Because it's this that you're looking to do, not this. It's this that's important. So you bring to your mind this ember, you place it at the base of your spine, you breathe in, and as you breathe in, it's like you're drawing it up to this point, and you bring it forward to here. And then you reverse, you breathe out, so this is going back and it's going down. And you keep doing that. And we do 5 minutes of it. Right? 10 minutes when you're more experienced, all you need. It sounds probably more complicated than it is, but over time it becomes a flow. Right? Because what happens is, as you put it together, at the moment, one starts thinking, well, am I doing this right? Am I doing that right? I've got to remember this, I've got to remember that. And that's normal. So it takes a while to actually build all this up until it becomes a habit. And when it becomes a habit, it becomes a flow. And that's when it's really working. But in the meantime, it will be energizing you. If it is that you have any heart conditions or anything like that, you must take it easy. If it is that you feel that you by doing it, you sweat profusely, or you feel over-energized, antsy or anything, just stop for a second and slow it down. The object is, you have to be able to do the control yourself, that you don't over-energize yourself. So it's like, a good analogy is a monk went along to his teacher, and he said to him, well, how do I deal with my mind in meditation? I mean, should I really be attacking it, or should I just kind of be totally relaxed. And he said, you ride horses, don't you? And he says, yeah. He says, well, when you hold the reins of a horse, how do you hold them? And he said, well, not too loose and not too tight. And that is how the practice is done. Not too loose and not too tight. And that is variable for everybody. I can't tell you that, you feel it. So you do enough that you're energizing yourself, but not too much that is making you feel bad. Okay? Do 5 minutes initially, and you can build that up to 10. There is no necessity to do more than that. And that is the whole initial pranayama practice, okay? And that will take you where you need to be. Now, let's go on to meditation, and I'm going to explain that to you. And that is just too simple for words. The pranayama is the complicated bit, if you like. Now, I told you before in the preamble about how the meditation works. What we are doing is we're going to do it with a mantra. Everyone know what a mantra is? Yeah? Everybody, yeah? Yeah? The mantra that we use is I am. It can be hamsa, soham, there are various ones, but it is important, we use I am. It is important that there is that M syllable involved in the mantra, and it is important for this practice that it is a dual syllable mantra. I am. Why? Because Kundalini, which is the force that we're trying to raise, has a vibration attached to it. It is shown as a serpent, and that is a good analogy, because the Kundalini force is not a static force. It's got a vibration to it, and so you get a certain vibration attached to the pranayama eventually, and there is a vibrational effect in the I am, because it's going like this. Now, the mantra, initially we do a mantra and it's words, but eventually that becomes vibrational. A mantra is the only means that connects the physical right up to the pure vibrational level, and it will take you all the way up there. It's like a thread. So for this purpose we do the mantra I am. Now what happens is that we start off I am, and then suddenly we goof off and we're thinking about something about, what did I do with my car keys? When that happens, we say in our minds, thinking, and we go back to the mantra. Every time that happens, we go back to the mantra. We do 10 minutes of this, back to the mantra. Why? It's very important that you understand why, that you haven't got someone just saying, do this, do that. Why? The reason is this. The I am, which is repetitive, takes you into that space of silence, as opposed to thinking, which you're being dragged out of. There are two mind spaces for this purpose. There's the space in which the I am resides, which is the space of silence, right? That's just an even space, and you do the I am, and it's a nice open space, and suddenly you're goofing off. Now you watch yourself goofing off, so you know the I is in the I am space, because you're watching yourself goofing off. Those are thoughts. You label them as thoughts, and you are disassociating yourself from the thoughts. And over time, what happens is we become more associated with the I am space and less associated with the thinking. Because we see the thinking for what it is. It's not us. It's an aspect of us that actually is the stressful aspect of us. And we will find that over time, by doing that, that aspect starts diminishing. And we become less stressed. Doesn't mean it's going to disappear, but we become less stressed by virtue of recognizing that aspect of ourselves. And the final part is Yoga Nidra, which we will do. You don't need to do it on a daily basis. We will do the Yoga Nidra lying down, but you can do Yoga Nidra, which is sometimes called Samyama, in the meditation position, seated, as an extension of the meditation. So the practice is going from the physical, which is the sun salutations, through the energization, to the meditation, which is an exercise in opening. It creates flexibility of mind. It gets rid of rigidity. Our minds are rigid. So we want to open our minds to possibilities. And in that realm, nothing is rigid. It's just a load of maybes. Okay? And that's what we want. And now we've opened up our minds into that space. And then we have Yoga Nidra. Is everybody familiar with Yoga Nidra? Yeah? Yoga Nidra is just, it's essentially being asleep but being conscious. Okay? And it's an extension of meditation. So you're now in, and that is the I am space. So you've got the I am space, and in the Yoga Nidra, you are in that I am space. That's where you are supposed to be. In that nice floaty space, but aware, not out to lunch. You're supposed to be there, fully conscious. And in that space, when you are fully conscious, that is where you want to be, because that is where you deal with these issues, like, for example, concepts of impermanence, let's say. Impermanence being a Buddhist aspect which one uses because it stops attachment to concepts. You see, what we're always doing is we're trying to grasp things. And in Yoga Nidra, we can find out a lot about who we are, why we do things. We're all conditioned. We're all conditioned from when we're very young. And the worst conditioning is from up to 5 years old, when we don't really have a logical mind. It's purely we are actually enlightened at that point. And when our parents say, don't do that because, God will punish you, by the time, we don't necessarily remember that, but by the time we're 20, 30, 40, 50, we have in the back of our mind that God is going to punish us under certain circumstances. And it's not so. So we build up, we are conditioned through our early life to certain beliefs. I mean, I have 4 children, and my father gave me, in some respects, some values that I was totally opposed to. But as my children were growing up, sometimes I could hear myself saying the same thing to my children. And I'd say to myself, wait a minute, what are you saying here? Because it's so automatic. And these are the things that are very hard to get at, because they occurred before we were able to actually look at them logically. They're just conditioning. And some of that conditioning is pretty bad. It's other people's conditioning. And so we end up with all this stress about many things that we don't really know why, and we can examine them in that space. Or if we have a problem, a particular problem, we can look at that problem. Or if we want to look at a spiritual concept, as, like I said, impermanence. The fact that we're always grasping good things we want to make last forever, and we get unhappy when things change. Whereas we should know that nothing lasts. Every moment is a separate now. There is no past, there is no future. We get upset because of our relationship with the past and the future. So in relation to the past, we have regrets and all sorts of things that we may have done things that we wish we hadn't done or whatever, or not done things. And in the future, we have hopes about certain things, which actually, at the end of the day, are bullshit. Because what's happened has happened and we can't do anything about it, right? It's gone. So what we should do is learn a lesson from it and move on, or not have done it at all in the first place. So if we did it, you know, and it's gone, and we've learned a lesson. But it's the past. And the future hasn't happened, and however we imagine it's going to happen, it's going to be something different anyway. So why do we drive ourselves crazy? Meditating on impermanence enables us to look at it that way and say, hey, you know, I really want to do this, or I want my life to go in this particular direction. It's not going in this direction, and so on and so forth, and beat myself up. The thing is then to say, look, I have this aspiration, and look at it from that perspective, and try to guide a sensible path towards that in a non-neurotic way. And in that space, there's tremendous power, because the mind has a lot more power than we imagine. Wherever we bring our attention is where the action is. So when I say to you, bring your attention to the base of your spine, I mean your attention. And if your attention is really strong, it will be there. You will bring it there. So it's where you bring it and what you bring. So if, for example, you have... if you let's say have a negative disposition, what you are doing by having a negative disposition is bringing more negativity towards you, because you're focusing on negativity, so it's attracting more. Or if you have a positive spin, you are attracting more positive stuff. You have people, and you probably all know someone like that. They consider themselves to be highly unlucky. Everything's going wrong. Oh yeah, well it's normal, you know, it's just, my life's shit, and it's always going to be shit, it always has been shit. Yeah, it will be shit. Because you think it's going to be shit, it will be shit, because you're admitting into your orbit only the negative aspects of possibility. And so we are able to deal with these things. It doesn't mean it's a life sentence. It means that we can recognize that in ourselves, and we can do something about it. And that's what the practice is for. It's to improve our lives. It's to do something about it. It gives us the tools to be better. The same thing with guilt, you know, this is attached to the same thing. We all have this level of guilt. But what is guilt? It's because someone's telling us that we shouldn't, you know, if we do something this particular way, it's bad. And the connotation in the West is that there has to be punishment. Guilt, punishment. And if there isn't punishment, then we punish ourselves because we feel we should be punished. And that is, but why? Because if we do something that we shouldn't have done, then we recognise that we've done something that we shouldn't have done and vow not to do it again. And if we do it again, we try harder and we try again. But it starts, and this is the Buddhist concept of it, that we are all fundamentally good. There's no such thing as a bad person. In Buddhism, it's called ignorant of how it really works. But there's hope for all of us, and we can all live happy lives. And this practice is about that. Any practice should be about that. It's not about getting involved in the practice and getting hung up on the practice. And if it is that you see Jesus or you see the Buddha or whatever, that is the, you know, you goof off there. No, you let all that go. That's not where it is. The object of the practice is ultimately enlightenment. So all these different things that we may encounter are all products of mind. They don't exist. When people see images of the Buddha or all these different entities, they are projections of mind. That's all they are. And the object is to see them as that and move on. Doesn't mean they're bad, but we have to see them for what they are. And it's just like ritual in religion. You move on. It's like, why is it, for example, that a Buddhist will see the Buddha and a Christian will see Jesus? It's the same, because what is it? It's a vibration. That's all it is. And because if one happens to be Christian, one identifies that vibration with a symbol, which is what Jesus is in that context. A Buddhist will have exactly the same vibration, but he will see the Buddha. But it's just a vibration. That's all it is. They're all the same. There's no difference between Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism. They all have the same aim and they all move to the same place. It's just that they've been rather twisted over the years, particularly in the Western religions, because we have had the church, let's say, interposed between God and ourselves. So the concept is that God is external. Because if God was not external, there's no room for an intermediary. Right? In the East, in Buddhism, God, which God is just a metaphor, that's all it is. It's a vibration. God is within us. And so these practices teach us that we have the strength. There's nobody telling us how we should be practicing. There's nobody that's telling us whether we are good or we're bad. Our conscience tells us that. We don't need somebody telling us that. Right? We know that. And so, for us, God is within us, and that is common to all of us. And Buddhism is about that common thing that we all have, that we all relate to one another in the same way. We're all human, we all feel the same way, we all are trying to avoid suffering. That's the Buddhist concept. And that makes us all feel better, because often we feel that we're the only ones that feel a particular way. But we're not. Everybody feels exactly the same way. Different subjects in their lives, but the feeling's exactly the same. We go through life feeling in a particular way. And we all do. It's the human condition. Right. Any questions?
How do we get this installed in the world?
Pardon?
How do we get this installed to everybody in the world? There would be no one fighting, wouldn't there?
Well, historically, yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, it would be great. But, and there is a growing movement in that direction. It's funny because in the East it's moving towards the Western view, materialism. And in the, they haven't had it, and they see it on the telly and they want it. And we've had it, and we've realised that, it doesn't, when they say, you get a washing machine, you're going to be happy, and then you get your washing machine and you're ecstatic for 5 minutes, and then you want a dryer, and you carry on, and your whole life is about, external stuff. And then at a certain point in time, which is where we are probably in the West, you realise that there's got to be more to it than just having lots of stuff. Now you see it's gone from stuff to experiences, because they're stuffed out with stuff they can try to sell us. So they're now trying to sell us, yeah, but it's an experience. But at the end of the day, it's within us. And how we do that is people like you, people like me, trying to get other people to engage. And that's not so easy. Because people, particularly in the West, they have a very lazy attitude towards self-improvement, if you want to call it that. People are not prepared to pay the price. And it's not that a teacher, guru, gives you anything. You have to do the work yourself. A teacher can just show you the way. That's all. He's the guy that's got the light, and he's going down the mine shaft, and you're following him. Right? That's basically what it is. But it's a question of if you're prepared to do the work, and most people are not. Fortunately, look, we've got a nice crowd here today, and there are probably many throughout Europe sitting in their groups, so hopefully it will expand.
You have got to want it, I think.
Yes, you do.
Can't make anybody go that way. You've got to feel it within yourself, the need.
That's right.
Yeah.
You absolutely do. It's not a commodity you can sell. what you can do is you can explain what it is,
Yeah.
and then it's up to the individual. I mean, I have a friend who he thought it was, you know, just a load of rubbish, and we're very close friends. And after about 25 years, he turned around to me and he said, you know, will you teach me meditation?
Mm-hmm. I've had the same thing.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and so it's a time. It's got to be the right time for somebody in their lives. It's a very personal thing. It's usually associated with something changing in their lives. It can be something. It can often be what really turns people is if they're going through a time of extreme hardship, and they really feel completely depleted. That is a very good entry point for people into it. Or
A death.
sorry?
A death.
Yes, something of that sort. You know, it can be that. Or it doesn't have to necessarily be that strong. It can just be a curiosity or a feeling that one has. But it's something that's generated within. And as you say, it's not something that one sells. You can't sell it. Now come on, let's get some questions here. You can't have understood all of that.
What about karma?
Karma. Ah, should have been here at the last one.
Yes.
Well, all right. Has anybody really pushed for time here? Because it's supposed to end at 5:30, and the way we're going is going to go a bit over that. All right, karma. What aspect do you want to know about karma?
Well, we're saying that we don't have to feel guilty about
Yeah.
anything, which I get, obviously. But if you look into some of the Eastern religions and the Raja Yoga, which I've been doing, etc., we obviously believe in karma. So we believe we bring things with us from past lives that we're working through in this life now. And some of that is generated by the karma we've stored in past lives.
Okay,
So,
right.
yeah.
Well, karma's a bit more complicated than that, because there's also the karma that we acquire in this life.
Obviously,
right?
but we bring some and
We
then
bring
we can
some.
make some.
You can equate karma to DNA, right? In a way, because karma is both physical and mental predispositions, right? So it's easy to see when you have a child that the child's got red hair just like you, but they also have certain predispositions that are not learned. They are born with those predispositions. So, and the view is that when we are born, we are enlightened. We are enlightened at that moment. And we go through our lives becoming progressively less enlightened. That's what's happening to us through all that burden of karma, which is weighing us down. Karma has the effect, it's like walking through life, and you start off with a little bag on your shoulder with some little sand in it, and as you go through life, it becomes a big bag, and there are rocks, and it's very, very hard. You're being stooped down with the pressure of that whole thing. So karma is cause and effect, but it's very, very subtle, because in any encounter you have your karma, but there's the other person's karma. And so that's why, for example, we can only be in control of what we do, body, speech and mind, what we think, what we say, how we act. We can only be in control of that. That's why motivation is important, as to why we're doing it. It's not the act, it's the motivation behind it that counts. That's the karmic aspect. Now, the person on the other end of that, let's assume there's a conversation going on, and I'm saying something. I have no real way of knowing how that is being received. That's the other person's karma. You can have two people listening to the same thing or watching the same act, reacting in completely different ways. That's their karma. So the message that you get out of it is you can't really influence to any large degree what's going on in other people. That's up to them, right? What you can do is just be true to your own principles. So if you go through your life and you have good principles that you stand by, that karmically is fine. I'll give you another analogy. You're walking down the street, two people are walking down the street, and right in front of both of them are two spiders. One of them doesn't see the spider, kills the spider. The other one sees the spider, stamps on it, doesn't like spiders. What's the karmic effect? The one who didn't see the spider, that has no karmic effect because there was no intent, right? Motivation. The one that did does have a karmic effect because they have killed something, right? And in Buddhist terms, they would say, well, that could have been your mother in a previous life, right? So there is a constant idea of preserving life, in no matter what form, animals, insects, it doesn't matter how small they are. But so karma is about intent, not the actual deed. So you could have done something a while ago that now you don't feel too proud of, but at the time you thought it was right.
So if you're in ignorance when
Pardon?
you do, if
Yes.
you are in ignorance when
You're
you
in
do
ignorance.
that,
So
then
if at the time you did it, you thought, you believed you were doing the right thing, that's fine. If it actually turned out that you didn't, it was right at that time. But again, we don't beat ourselves up. That's the idea of not feeling guilty about it. Because at the time we did the right thing. So it is about a moral compass, if you like. And karma does work that way, because if you do something, or if we do something, and we know it's wrong, we don't need a priest to give us forgiveness. We know we've done wrong. And so we react accordingly. It's in our psyche. And how we relate, it's cause and effect. So when we do bad stuff, the way we present ourselves in the world is a reflection of that. Now, that's being very simplistic because it's much more subtle than that. But it's a series of those sorts of things. So if it is that, and someone that, say, has got a highly manipulative character, manipulative in a negative way. In other words, they're trying to get everybody to play their game in a very egocentric way. In other words, not what's good for the other person, but what they're trying to get somebody to do something that's good for them and manipulating. That is a very bad karmic scenario, and bad shit happens to them. It does. And it's not by accident. Because why? Because your conscience is constantly playing. And the conscience has to be vanquished. It's nature. You can't avoid it. It has to be vanquished. And that's how karma works. It's that kind of way.
How do you explain collective karma then?
Well, it's the same thing. It's like, for example, if you take, a country has a karma, a town has a karma, a family has a karma. It's the collective consciousness of that group that interplay and act in a certain way. You can see the karma of the West, of Europe, you can see what's going on today.
So there's things you can do something about and things you can't.
Pardon?
So some of that collective karma is very hard to do something against. You can only
It's,
sort of...
as an individual,
Yeah.
yes, it is, because it involves certain stimuli being put in place to change that scenario and move it in a different direction.
which indirectly affect your life,
Yeah,
even though it's not necessarily your own personal karma,
Yeah.
so how much good or whatever you try and do,
well,
it's...
you can only control yourself, what you do, right? And the collective karma is something that one has much more difficulty in influencing, right? But if one understands it, that's the thing to do. If you can understand what's going on with the collective karma, then you can try to accommodate yourself within that. But it doesn't mean that because, say, you are a karmically positive person and there's a load of, in that group there's a lot of negative karma, that you have to be sucked into that negative karma. You're affected by it, but you mustn't allow yourself to be drawn into it. And that's again what this practice is for, is so that you can see that. Because when if it's pure emotion, we just react and we're drawn into it. But when you have that space and you can actually look and say, hey, well, what's going on here, you know, and you put distance there, and that distance enables one not to be affected by it. You're affected by it because you might not be happy about it, but not that it has a negative influence on one's day-to-day level of happiness. Let's put it that way. Happiness is something that is internally generated.
You know those spiders?
Yeah. What about the spiders?
Well, the spiders, you know, in the bad karma and all that, the one who steps on it or whatever you do. You know, there's also ahimsa, you know, you've got a big bad cockroach or something, you know, a spider in your house, or it's an animal as well, it's somebody's karma, it's somebody. But you know, you have to protect yourself from mosquito,
Right.
which is a bite. So you also have to live according to ahimsa, so you know where you can excuse yourself from killing that mosquito, because you need to protect yourself as well.
Well, that's
And
absolutely
it shouldn't
right.
give you bad karma, because that mosquito might carry malaria or something, and you have to save yourself.
You're right.
So is that okay?
But it's not, you know, I've kind of oversimplified it in terms of like you kill a spider and, you know, something terrible's going to happen. It's not like that at all. It's much more subtle than that. And you're absolutely right that if that kind of situation arises, there's a lot of debate within Buddhist and yogic circles about the karmic effect of that sort of action. And some people would say under absolutely no circumstance should you kill anything no matter what, even if it kills you. Right? Others would take that view. It's a personal thing.
Well, I guess it's finding an excuse to that you're just killing someone in a way, because
Yeah,
of course
it
nobody
is.
likes to kill anything.
But if the point about it really is that if you can live with it, right? If it is that by killing that animal, you are negatively affected by the act, that's the karmic repercussion of it. If it is that you do it and you can say, well, look, you know, really, I had no choice because I don't want to catch malaria, you know, oversimplifying it, and you go off and it doesn't bother you, then it's karmically, for you, neutral.
But you still think about it, you know.
Yeah,
Huh?
because you're
Yeah,
aware.
even when you're
That's
Well,
the thing, you're
down the
aware.
hall.
Yes.
Well, you see, look, if it is that you feel that it has, if it is that you feel that it has that it is affecting you in a negative way, like you shouldn't have done it, right? If that's how you feel about it, then the lesson to be learned is don't do it again, or catch malaria, whichever. You know, it's a difficult question. So go ahead.
To work on that.
Yeah, then we can observe that before, maybe still people in the Catholic Church, they go to confess when they have a bad conscience.
Yeah.
We have this inner truth, intuition, knowing that I've done something. So when they went to confess to the priest, and priest says, yes, no problem, you go and say 100 Ave Marias at your home. So you don't create any karma. Actually, it's a very intelligent system, no? People will avoid it because it's your own consciousness building up the karma.
It is
so
building it up.
If you feel, he says it's fine, so wow.
Well, yeah, you see, that's the
I
problem.
may be turning into Catholic.
Well,
Do you need a third person to tell you that's okay? You can
No, but
say
they
that
have
to
this
yourself
system.
within yourself.
yeah,
I
because
know,
hang on a
yes.
minute, because it's an interesting
It
question,
is.
but because you see, the thing about it is that nobody else can really absolve you. You can only absolve yourself, right?
Exactly.
Now, for example, in the Jewish religion and non-Jewish, they have the Day of Atonement, right? One day a year, and everybody goes off to the synagogue and prays like mad. And I remember when I was a kid, my father, he didn't really believe in it, but he was like taking an insurance policy out more than anything, turning up. So, and I'd see all these people praying away furiously, and I was saying to myself, well, what's going on here? How come I don't get it? And then I realised they're all taking out an insurance policy so that they can go out and do all that bad shit again the following day.
Well, that's
And
what I
that's
mean.
not the point. That's why there should not be someone that absolves you. The only person that can absolve you is you.
Well,
It's
you,
you,
God,
but
sorry.
you believe, think about it, that is absurd.
Within you.
Because you need that person. When that person
My God,
says,
so it's back to you.
Yeah.
I don't have any bad conscience anymore, it's amazing.
Well,
It's amazing.
you know, though, they say that, but it's not really an absolution,
Well,
because
people who believe in it,
they,
obviously.
even if they believe in it and they've done something bad, and the priest says to you that you are absolved, I don't think that it karmically has that effect, because you still know, your conscience is still registered that you've done wrong, even if the priest tells you otherwise.
Yes,
Your conscience is higher.
It's true.
Don't.
I was just going to say, I try to, if I have to kill a spider or a mosquito, I always do it with love and light, rather than with venom.
Yeah.
And I just do it in a peaceful way, as much as I can.
Dispatch them peacefully.
Without suffering.
I try and push them away, try and push them
You
away.
can get a blood gun that you put on top of.
There's no
Right.
chicken out getting a
No,
cockroach
we
down
can
a
hold
hole.
them so they can get on top of them. Then it goes.
You can organize a funeral for your mosquito, so maybe you feel better.
Well, you know-
The mosquitoes are sort of like, it's
Cucarachas.
just the cucarachas.
My
It's
cats
why
must
I
have
keep
a very
them
bad
from
karma. Mine absolutely.
Well, no, they
Killing
don't, you
everything.
see, they don't, because
That's
cats don't have a conscience in that way,
Yeah.
it's pure reaction.
Yeah,
You see.
Yeah.
It's a human condition, and that's one of the things in Buddhism that is recognised, that the only realm in which you can become enlightened, and there are 6 realms, is the human realm. You can't become enlightened through any of the others, because there's no conscience. Right? Any other questions?
I must say that the dogs must have a consciousness, because when they've done something they know they're not supposed to be
Yeah.
doing, they are ashamed.
They are, but it's
That's
pure
different.
reaction. You know, it's pure. They do, but it's.
But before your reaction even, I come home and the rubbish is up there. I
Yeah.
don't even know he's been picking it up. So he's already hiding behind the
Yeah.
chair, looking
Yeah.
guilty. So some kind
Well-
of consciousness they do have. I think they're evolving also.
Well, they do. You know, maybe it was my
In
mother in a
consciousness.
previous life. You know.
Anyway, can you open the window a little
Yeah,
bit?
of course. Go ahead. Everybody all right with that? Yeah. Go ahead. Any other questions? Nothing? All right. Well, look. Let's do the practice then, shall we? So I'll take you through it. Just get comfortable. Everybody comfortable? Now we're going to start off doing the 3 deep breaths. So we start by breathing out. We're going to breathe in, slowly, rhythmically, up, imagining healing energy going throughout our body. And then we're going to breathe out, slowly, and we're going to relax right through our body. And we're going to do that 3 times. Okay, so breathe out. going to do the pranayama. Now, for this purpose, concentrate on the light more than the breath. So what we're going to do for 5 minutes is we're going to imagine a bright source of light at the base of the spine, moving up to the back of one's head and moving forward to the forehead and back as we breathe in and out in the way that I mentioned to you before, starting now. Should be a strong, vigorous breath in, dynamic. eyes when we finish. Okay, now a word about the posture. Very important that one's back is really straight, shoulders back. You should sit high as if you're being pulled from above. Very important that. Hands like that. Pranayama is very important for the posture. Okay? Mudra. These are all mudras. The energy, it's how the energy flows. Right. Okay, now we're going to do the meditation. Now remember, we're going to do I am. We just conjure up I am in our minds. I am. It goes like this. And we're going to keep to the I am. And if we get a thought that comes into our minds, we just say, thinking. We bring ourselves gently back to the I am. And we just keep the I am going and going and going. And we'll do, I think probably it's better to do just 5 minutes of it. Okay? Everybody clear on that? Yeah? Right. let's get ready to do Yoga Nidra. If anybody's cold, we can give you blankets. Anybody want a blanket? Put over them. Keep warm. Everyone all right? Okay. Anybody else want a blanket?
Have tea, please. Yes.
Right, now, everybody lie down in the dead posture. That's a bit too high to be doing it with the bolster behind there. Yeah, it's better to do it with a cushion. That's too high. Or nothing, or... Now, legs should be slightly apart. Abdominal breathing. Just in the abdomen. Nothing more. Right. I want you to bring your attention to your toes. Toes, relax. Feet, relax. Ankles, relax. Lower leg, relax. Knees, relax. Thighs, relax. Now bring your attention to your hips. Hips, relax. Abdomen, relax. Chest, relax. Now I want you to bring your attention to your fingers. Fingers, relax. Hands, relax. Wrists, relax. Forearms, relax. Elbows, relax. Now bring your attention to your shoulders. Shoulders, relax. feel each vertebrae sink into the floor, one by one. Vertebrae relax. Neck relax. Throat relax. Jaw relax. Tongue relax. Cheeks relax. Ears relax. Nose, nostrils relax. Eyes relax. Forehead relax. All the muscles of the face relax. Scalp relax. Now I want you to imagine that you're in some woods, lots of trees, sun coming in between the trees. It's a beautiful sunny day. You slowly start walking through the trees, not a care in the world, looking at the flowers in the woods, animals, trees as far as the eye can see. You're walking forward. The more forward you walk, the more relaxed you get. Getting more and more relaxed. Eventually, when you move forward, you start seeing light in the distance, the far end of the trees. And as you walk forward, the trees become less and less, until finally you're standing in a beautiful meadow, all green grass. The light that is overwhelming you. Strong, white light. It's warm. You walk towards the light. And the light envelops you completely. And you feel totally relaxed. And I want you to stay in that space, just totally relaxed, until you hear the cymbals. want you to take a deep breath. Move your head from side to side. Move your hands and feet. And then in your own time, turn onto your right side. Then come up into the seated position. Is that good? Everyone enjoy that? Feeling nice and relaxed. Where you should be right now is where you should be with your meditation, in that nice space. That's what yoga nidra is there to create. So I do hope that you will practice regularly and that you will come. We do this once a month, and it's never the same. This will be up on YouTube. Julian puts it up there so you can always pick up what's gone on. It's good to listen to it again. And you can listen to previous ones. They're all different, you know. And I hope you got something out of it. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.